like to welcome you all. My name is Ananda. This is Maria. We're very glad you could join us today, whether in person or on the internet. And I'm going to read from Rays of the One Light, which is the book that Swami Kriyananda wrote. This week's reading is called The Infinite Christ. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The Gospel of St. John contains some of the most profound spiritual teachings in the Bible. In the first chapter, many subtle truths are suggested concerning higher states of self-realization. Here, John the Baptist is described as one reaching up toward that high state. He was not that light, the Gospel tells us, but was sent to bear witness of that light. Jesus Christ, by contrast, is described as the light itself. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. One essential truth stands out in this teaching: universal truths. Disciples saw the Master clothed in human form, and therefore judged him in terms of greatness relative to the greatness of other teachers. Wisdom, however, sees the Master's very greatness in terms of a cosmic unity. There is a passage in the Path by Swami Kriyananda in which this point is emphasized. The Master, Paramahansa Yogananda, explained, "The saint who attains that exalted consciousness never says, 'I am God,' for he sees it was the vast ocean that became his little wave of ego. The wave, in other words, would not claim, when referring to the little self, to be the ocean." At this juncture, Devi, who was present, cried excitedly, "But sir, if you are one with that ocean, that means you are God." "Why I?" Master asked. "Say he. He is God. But still, sir, you are one with him, and he is the only reality. That means you, too, are God." "But this body isn't God." "You aren't identified with your body, sir. So one may still say you are God." Well, in that case, why do you say you? You too are that. In a discussion of this sort, it is less confusing if we say he. But what's the difference? "The scriptures say," Master began. "It's only your humility, sir," Davy broke in, "that makes you distinguish between yourself and him." How can there be humility when there is no consciousness of ego? Triumphantly, Davy cried, "But if you have no ego left, that means you are God." Master laughingly continued the earlier statement, which Davy had interrupted. "The scriptures say, 'He who knows Brahma becomes Brahma.'" "There," cried Davy, "you said it yourself." Master rejoined, still laughing, "It was in his overarching spirit that he saw himself one with the infinite." But Davy was unable to make this mental leap from a pure expression of infinity to infinity itself. "You quoted those scriptures, sir," he reminded Master relentlessly. "That means you agree with them." Recognizing that the distinction was perhaps too subtle for many to grasp, Master concluded, "Well, he who says he is God isn't God. And," he added with a smile, "he who says he isn't, isn't." And there the subject rested amid general laughter. The greater a spiritual teaching, the more greatly we betray it by particularizing it with dogmas. Truth itself, not the Christian truth or the Hindu truth, incarnates on earth with the birth of a fully liberated Master. As the Bhagavad Gita teaches in the 4th chapter, "Unborn, changeless, Lord of creation and controller of my cosmic nature, though I am, yet entering nature, I am dressed in the cosmic garment of my own Maya. O Bharata, whenever virtue declines and vice predominates, I incarnate on earth. Taking visible form, I come to destroy evil and reestablish virtue. Thus, through
Thank you. Thank you for this beautiful energy today. I'd like to read from Yogananda's Whispers from Eternity. And this is the prayer demand for removing the cork of ignorance. No more shall my consciousness remain bottled up in this little vessel of flesh, corked with ignorance. No more will I remain moving through the sea of cosmic consciousness, night and day, years, decades, and how many incarnations, so close, yet never able to contact thy sea. Through the bursting vibration of cosmic sound and the surging of thy holy name, I have removed the cork of ignorance, which so long separated me from thee, though we lived together so closely. Now my body consciousness will meet thy all-surrounding, all-pervading consciousness. No longer will I walk heedlessly in thee, but never knowing and feeling thee. Thine image within me shall meet thine image everywhere. By releasing the I-ness in me, I will know that I am thou, and that thou alone art the little egos of us all. So our subject this morning is the infinite Christ, and it's a very important reading, important to the spiritual journey, important to our understanding and relationship with the Guru, important to our relationship with God. It's very revealing, the reading, but there's an aspect to it that I at least find a little disturbing. And it's, we come into the incarnation, we come into our life, and we yearn for a greater meaning. We yearn for something richer, more purposeful, perhaps even inner communion, perhaps even liberation. And we, in the power of that yearning, in the power of that an incarnation of a divine being, and having magnetized our yearning, the love of our heart, we don't get it. Always the whole unsettling. And of course there's reasons for that, but it's that aspect of putting forth that energy, putting forth that spiritual magnetism, drawing it, and then not seeing it in total. As it says in the Gita, Krishna says, changeless, controller of all creation, of my nature, Lord of creation, all of this, yet entering into my very own nature, I am clothed in the Maya that I have created. And so unrecognizable all the time. There's a delightful story from a direct disciple of Yogananda's, Peggy Dietz. And she's no longer in her body, but just wonderful, wonderful soul. And many of us here had a chance to spend time with her on occasion. And she tells the story of when she met Yogananda, and quite a miraculous story. But at this one point, she's coming to meet him at his request at his room at Mount Washington. And she comes in the door, and no sooner does she come in, he welcomes her to sit down. And he pulls over this scrapbook of photos, family photos, members of his family, and he points to his brother, and he looks at her and he says, "Doesn't this look like Cary Grant?" And she's like, "Well, if I look really hard, maybe." But on another level, she's thinking, who is this? Who is this? Is this really a spiritual teacher? Is this a master? Why would he be interested in Hollywood and actors? And for those of you who are too young to know, Cary Grant was a famous actor way back. So, but there's that, here is someone, God incarnate, but gosh, there's this human body, and it's a human body like mine. Basically, we're the same thing here. There's a personality. There's even the ego on the level of being grounded, on the physical plane. And is this person really different than me? Is their consciousness really different? And it's hard to make sense of that. It's hard to make meaning of it. And it's not unique to any, this is all pervading. It doesn't matter what religion people are a part of, what belief system, what living within the fabric of this, but we don't recognize it. In the life of Jesus, the masters, they that. To get that when it's bubble. Jesus, it makes absolutely material plane of the baby Krishna just playing in the out of doors, and his mother's keeping all little babies do everything. Playing and taint. She closes the mouth. Okay, I can. What we see is what we get, and if we're looking through the eyes, we don't see that infinite consciousness embodied there. In the life of Yogananda, oftentimes he said, and you read this in his writings, go, no one dwells in this temple now but God. And in his poem Samadhi, I am the cosmic sea watching the little ego floating in me. But again, just like Devi in that reading this morning, we don't quite see it. One time, Swami's autobiography, The New Path, and he was with Yogananda and out at 29 Palms, and Yogananda was working on the Gita commentaries. And at night he would call Kriyananda, Walter, to come and walk with him around the grounds to get some exercise and surely satsang for Swamiji. But they would walk together, and Master asked Swami for his arm to support him as they walked, to steady him. And sometimes Yogananda would stop during the walk at different points, and Swamiji said that his body would just rock forward and backward, almost like he was going to just topple over. And he said on one occasion, sometimes I don't know which body to move. I don't know which body I'm in. Again, addressing that consciousness beyond the form, that consciousness residing in all forms. Yogananda said of himself, I live in the sphere of infinity. I am conscious of this body only once in a while. Isn't that refreshing? Wouldn't you like to be able to say that? I don't know about you, but I'd love to be able to say that. I am conscious of this body only once in a while. I live in the sphere of infinity. But that's the reality of these masters. That's what they're presenting. It's what they're offering. It's what they're saying. And a lot of the time, it just goes right by. We just see the world through these human eyes and see the human incarnation. And it stops there. It doesn't go beyond that. So how do we, the purpose of this life is to break that bubble of identity with matter and material consciousness. And Yogananda was really strong in this. He was strong because he sees that we can do it. We can cross that bridge to the infinite. And he said, you are a child of God. You must live up to that divine birthright. You must live up to that divine birthright. And it was a command. It was a reality that he already saw in us, and that's why he could say that. And that's why we can receive that. We can try to embrace that. That's really the purpose of our lives as devotees. It's the purpose of all lives. But once we've taken this step onto the path, that's what we're really talking about. That's what we're really moving toward. Swami Kriyananda, in describing discipleship once, he described it as discipleship to the infinite. It's a way that we don't oftentimes, probably most times, really think about it. We think about taking discipleship to the guru. We think about it in terms of the guru-disciple relationship. But he was saying it's discipleship to the infinite. That's what why the guru comes to us. He or she is that bridge to cosmic consciousness, that means by which if we tune in, we're going to connect. Yogananda said when we sit to pray, introduce me to God. That's what meditation is about. It's great that we feel peace from meditation. It's great that we feel joy from meditation. It's great that we feel some semblance of balance in our lives because we meditate. It's great that we feel bliss, but it's not enough. Introduce me to God. Introduce me to the infinite, to that consciousness that's beyond the form. And so I remember there was a disciple of this path many, many years ago, probably over a decade or two now. And she was very close to leaving this plane. And she asked Swami Kriyananda, to come and bless her. And she wanted to say goodbye in person. And he did. And he came. And she asked him, what is the astral world like? What am I up for? What is this about? Where am I going? And he described it to her in a lot of detail. And she was an individual, her temperament and orientation was that of an artist, like a designer kind of person. So very creative and loved creating and seeing creativity express in this world. And so I think that's why, he just described the astral world in such detail. And he even said, you'll love it. You'll absolutely love it. The person that you are, you're going to love the way that you'll be able to express and be and just that whole consciousness. But he said, don't stay there. Don't stay for long. Keep going. Keep going. And I've always remembered that. It's extremely powerful to my consciousness that we just, again, introduce me to God. That we keep holding that out there. Meditate on the spiritual eye. Take it through the form. God has given us the form. God has given us the guru. But see within the guru. Try to meditate on that consciousness within the guru that is beyond his or her physical form. When we meditate on the Om, this is what happens in that technique. Our consciousness expands and keeps expanding. There's a beautiful story in the life of Saint Anthony, beautiful moment in that story, and it's a very inspiring life of inner renunciation, of dedication and self-offering to the infinite. Nothing stood in Anthony's way, and to that end he kept retreating further and further and further into the desert, just a no man's land. And he lived there for decades. He lived till he was over 100. This incredible controversy going on in the church. Huge debate. It was undermining the whole, everything. And is Jesus the man or is Jesus divine? And both sides were just very strong in their opinion. And someone sent for Anthony. And Anthony, feeling this is the will of God, came to Alexandria. And as he walked through the town, didn't say anything, but story, legend has it, just a very powerful presence, a very powerful presence. And just as he walked through the marketplace, just everything stopped. People stopped selling, people stopped communicating, talking, just everyone, silence. And he came to the church and he stood on the threshold, and again this seizing debate is taking place. and Anthony is brought in by a friend. And just as he stands there right at the threshold, there's this hush over everything. And then they speak to Anthony and explain to him what the dilemma is. And it doesn't make sense. Isn't it obvious? The answer to this question, don't you know? Isn't this what everyone experiences when they go inside and talk to God and be in God? But he hasn't said anything. And then after they've presented this debate, Anthony simply says, I have seen him. And at that point, everybody stops talking and gets down on their knees and is devotional. No matter what their argument before, they are centered in on that truth. They are right there with Anthony. And of course, it doesn't all come to pass immediately that everyone is converted to that flow, but it does change, it does move. And that's all he said. It was the power behind what he said. It was the consciousness behind what he said. Because when we go into that deeper experience, when we go into, for example, that vibration through Om, our consciousness expands and we know. We know because our intuition is to the fore. Yogananda says that intuition is the soul's power of knowing God. And so we know. We don't have to think it out. We don't have to reason it out. We don't have to wonder at this human figure. Is this my guru? Is this a divine being? Is this just like Devi? Is this just, who is this? What nature of person is this? And, Yogananda would oftentimes say, when you are in Om, nothing can touch you. And we think of this in the context of the material world. We think of it in terms of our physical being will be protected. And that may be the case. It may not. We're in these bodies temporarily. They come, they go. But much more what he was speaking about was consciousness. When we're in the consciousness of Om, nothing can touch us. What does that mean? It means matter, material consciousness. There's no room for it there. It can't touch us when we're in that Om. We know intuitively, we know on a soul level, there is nothing about the mind, there is nothing about the matter that can get in there, into that vibration. It just simply doesn't belong. There's no space for it. And so, Kriyananda, this consciousness of being in the infinite, of residing in that awareness of that larger reality, it has very practical applications. It might seem exotic or far out to be meditating on the infinite or meditating on God. What is this really? But this teaching too has a very practical element that's addressed in the reading. It talks about incarnations of truth. That's really who the masters are. They're incarnations of truth, not any what is real as distinct from what is not real. And so as the masters have incarnated to share truth on a practical level, very real level, we ourselves need to be instruments for truth in daily life. And I was remembering just our times with Swami Kriyananda. Oftentimes he would gather us to just share about directions for the community, for Ananda, decisions we needed to make as a community. And he would present some ideas. He might present ideas. He would always ask us, what do you think? What do you think? How do you feel about this? And I remember one time, it was a small group of people. The discussion isn't really important. But I remember saying, well, this is what I feel. And as I said it, from a certain perspective, it was right and true, if that's where you are. And I guess I was in that moment. But on another level, I immediately felt my consciousness getting smaller, because my feeling, my perspective in that moment was something that wasn't as big as it could be. And that was the beauty of having this kind of sharing with him, or, tuning into and connecting with the Guru on this level. Because then we're trying to open our consciousness, we're trying to expand our consciousness, we're trying to do what is true. We're trying to do then what is appropriate and what is expansive. And what I saw at so many gatherings like this and exchanges like this was that if we could get in to the flow that Swamiji was presenting, not because it was his idea, not because it was his perspective on how things should go, from an egoic sense, but if we could get into that flow, because his consciousness was just so big, it was so inclusive, it just didn't have boundaries. And when we were able to get into that flow, then what you saw is that people's lives were changed. People's hearts were changed. The magnetism that was generated was profoundly noticeable, because in that expanded consciousness we can navigate through Maya. And that's the beauty of it. If we wonder how to make sense of this world, if we wonder how to figure it out and do what we need to do, we're not going to get that answer mentally. We're not going to get that answer in our intellect. But if we expand our consciousness, that's our navigating tool. That's how we're able to move through this fabric of Maya, so tightly woven by none less than the Lord Himself. Swamiji would oftentimes say, samadhi is not something we have to acquire. It's ours already. It's our nature. And so let us help each other to live up to that divine birthright that has been given. Thank you.
Children, mother call you, knowing not it's you they call. Some through mists of their unknowing, bruised and hurting when they fall. Turn away, but who can lead you? You, the mother of us all. If the child forgets its mother, will she coldly turn away? Wise or foolish, we're your children. Guide us, Mother, if we stray. Those whose hearts are torn with anguish lack the power your name to call. Heal their wounds, Ma, soothe their sorrows. You, the mother of us all. Heal their wounds, Ma, soothe their sorrows.